Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Backer and welcome to Off the Wall Novels. Today I have a colossal book haul to share with you all. It might crash YouTube servers. It's so big, it's humongo. But I have almost finished my first year as a teacher. I guess I've been working in school since 2020, so I'll talk a little bit about that too. And I've got this book haul kind of divided into different categories. There's a couple more miscellaneous, but I have been trying to branch out in my reading, and I look back on some videos that I made, I guess 2 years ago now, about how frustrated I was with postmodernism, as if that's the only kind of genre of book that there is. But with postmodernism, it's so engaging and so fun and so layered and so rife for analysis that sometimes it's kind of hard to find stuff that scratches that same itch. And so luckily I found stuff that is not postmodern, but is still lighting me up in that postmodern way that I love so much. But before I get into that, I will also say that I am working diligently on the Kingdom of Liminal Space, and it's slightly ahead of schedule. So if you're not familiar, that's my next novel. It's going to be about a musician who's a little depressed at the state of music, and after connecting with a modular synthesizer, they channel an entity into their brain that makes them reconsider everything. So stay tuned for that. I'm very excited about it. There's going to be a concept album with it too, and a bunch of other little mixed media things that I'm not quite ready to share yet. So please keep on the lookout. But while you wait, please consider buying Lionel Lancet in the Right Vibe. This is my second novel, and I am extremely proud of it. This is a very beaten up copy, so whoever read this was just tearing through it. They absolutely loved it. But this is a slacker noir, kind of in the style of The Big Lebowski, and a lot of people have told me that it's very thought-provoking, but also very funny, and that's exactly what I was going for. So please, if you want to support the channel, check out Lionel Lancet in the Right Vibe. It's a quick read. I'm not trying to give you homework. It's supposed to be fun. So let's get into this book haul. If you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen me talking a whole lot about Goethe and Faust. And it's funny because I made a big post at the end of 2023 about how 2024 was going to be me reading all these New York novelists, and I read, The Bell Jar, and loved it, and was like, oh yeah, I got to read all these New York writers. And then out of nowhere, I was like, nah, I'm just going to start reading a bunch of Germans. And so I'm going to get into some Goethe stuff in a second, but probably the best book I've read in that regard that's given me a bunch of other cool books to read is called The German Genius by Peter Watson. And as you can see, I have really tabbed this thing up. It's a German intellectual history, and the subtitle is Europe's Third Renaissance, the Second Scientific Revolution, and the 20th Century. And I really like books like this. It kind of reminds me of The Cave in the Light by Arthur Herman, that it's like a pop intellectual history book. So it's not like an anthology of different thinkers' texts. It's more of like each major thinker gets a couple pages and they do an overview of their major works and contributions to intellectual history. And like I said too, it's just given me so many different ideas of new things to read, and kind of having it all bound in one place like this too makes it more of a roadmap rather than me just finding random titles and random authors that might be interesting. And so honestly, this book alone has kind of set me up on a project that will probably take the rest of my 30s in order to complete, but that's kind of cool too, because there's no rush. I have the rest of my life to get into this kind of stuff. And with a lot of the writers that it covers and thinkers that it covers, it's going to stretch me a little bit, but that's kind of what I want, because I, as a reader, have always been a little allergic to stuff that's old. But then after reading Faust, I guess 6 or 7 months ago now, probably maybe 7 or 8 months ago, I have realized that that was just kind of a silly rule that I'd made in my head because I didn't want to explore more. And so I got into Goethe, I got into a bunch of these other German writers that I'll share with you guys now. But you can also probably see that I only got about halfway through it. As it approached the 20th century, I realized that I was really more interested in some of the older German thinkers, and it was getting into more intellectual contributions from mathematicians and scientists. Not exactly my interest. I might finish it at some point, but for $30, I think I got way more value out of it than money can buy. So I'm very happy with it, and I've been going back to it a lot and treating it kind of like an encyclopedia. But essentially, I guess I could start with Goethe. As you guys know, Faust was my favorite read of last year, and as a first-year teacher, it was perfect for me because it's all about a guy kind of figuring out what knowledge is supposed to be and turning to magic when he realizes that he's dissatisfied with knowledge. And I'm just a first-year teacher. I'm not saying that I've exhausted all of human potential, but it was just really cool to have these really beautiful passages in front of me that had this kind of occult and spiritual bent that resonated with a lot of my interest in people like Thomas Pynchon and a lot of the postmodern writers who were critiquing the sciences, because Mephistopheles, the stand-in for the devil here, has a lot of kind of trickery and deceit that he plays in order to show that like the light of knowledge is only part of the story, that what exists in the gloom and the shadows is just as potent for investigation, if not more. Kind of that idea of like when you stare into the abyss stares back into you. So I was not planning on doing a reading, but now that I have it in front of me, I do want to share one or two things that stuck out to me, because God, there's just so many beautiful passages in this. And so I'll probably do a whole nother Faust video. In the meantime, check out that first Faust video that I made. It is supposed to be made accessible for anybody, even if you've never heard of Goethe before. I tried to make it very cinematic too. And if I could toot my own horn, I think it's the best video that I've ever made on this channel. And it didn't get as many views as I expected, so go check that out, and it might encourage you to get into some of these old Germans. But this passage here, or do I want to do this one? How about... You know, I actually can't find the section, but I'll just repeat it from memory, because there is a really inspiring thing. Oh, no, here it is. It's right in front of me. So this is like at the very beginning of part 2, and the chorus, who I guess is kind of like a Greek chorus, is talking about how the sun is rising, and it's having us like wake up from either depression or from ignorance. And there's a lot of, in the spiritual and occult tradition and Gnostic tradition as well, this idea that spiritual fulfillment is a matter of knowledge. It's a consciousness expanding experience that can, make you better. And I just think that's so cool in a piece of writing, and I feel that when I read this. So without me yapping anymore, send your gaze to yonder brightness, wish on wish at will to reap. You are cradled but in lightness, cast it off the shell of sleep. Scruple not to be audacious as the doubting rabble gasp. All is open to the gracious who perceive and swiftly grasp. I just love that. And so much of these like German idealists and people within the like Sturm and Drang movement, and a lot of the writers in the 17 and 1800s in Germany, have this credulity with spirituality and with making an amazing country and an amazing nation that I think our current times really lack and could take some inspiration from. So that's been really cool. And at the same time, they still seem very critical of traditional meta-narratives too. So it does kind of scratch that postmodern itch. But rather than descending into nihilism or a shrug like nothing means anything, it seems like they still have this desire to like go out and improve yourself for your fellow countrymen. And I have just been really uplifted by that, and put a lot of those ideas in the Kingdom of Liminal Space too. So this video is already getting long, so I'm going to burn through these next few rather quickly. I got a couple more Goethe books. I'm about halfway through Italian Journey, and this is when, I think like in his 30s, he hit some writer's block, and so in the middle of the night, he just decided, or he probably decided this beforehand, but he just, without telling any of his friends, ran away to Italy in order to reconnect with the ancients. And it's a lot of fun. I haven't had the most quick pace with it, because it's not really a story as much as it is him just like having a travel log. But then in reading it in tandem with Goethe the Alchemist, which is not by him, obviously, it's by Ronald Douglas Gray, it's been really cool to see how he's putting a lot of like occult and alchemical symbolism into Italian Journey. And so he'll make references to like finding the Urpflanze, which is like the primal plant that they were looking for, which if I understand correctly does not exist. But at that time in history, they thought that just like the spirit yearns for a higher power or for gnosis or for that consciousness expanding experience, so do plants and animals, that they are kind of reaching out of themselves for this higher potential, or how they're, they're kind of derived from this like primal or perfect or transcendent or Platonic plant. So I'll set that to the side for a second because I'm still working on both of those. I got two other works by Goethe. Gertz von Berlichingen, which is a play, and then also The Sufferings of Young Werther. Now, In the German Genius, it said that this was the first Bildungsroman, but then I can't find reference to that anywhere else online, so I don't know if he made a mistake or if he was trying to say that it was more like this laid the foundation for the Bildungsroman. And there's a lot to be said about the Bildungsroman. I just thought it was like a coming of age story, but I guess within the German translation, Bildung is more of this comprehensive self-development and self-cultivation for the good of others and for the good of yourself. And so I don't think that that's what this is about. Some people I've talked to have said that it seems kind of passé, and it's only in retrospect that we appreciate it because Goethe turned out to be such a genius. I'm still going to read it. It's very short. Like, most of this text actually is interpretive notes and essays and stuff. So I'll set that to the side for a moment. Let's keep going with these Germans. I also picked up this play called Nathan the Wise by Gotthold Ephraim Lessing. And this is also very short. I think it was considered one of the very first literary works within this like camp of Germans. It, I think, is from the early 1700s or late. Maybe not. Oh no, I guess it is more like mid 1700s. It doesn't matter, but I think it was remarkable at the time because it was uniting Christianity, Judaism, and Islam in a very accepting and progressive way for the time, and I guess laid a lot of foundations for the literary works that came after it. Pretty cool if you ask me. I'm looking forward to reading it, but it is not on the top of my list right now. Nor is this next one that will probably kill me if I ever finish it, Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. There's a lot of great insight about Hegel and this work in general in the German Genius, and I'm very excited to check it out. But just in flipping through the introduction, I realized I need to do a lot of pre-reading for a book like this, because I want to, if I actually sit down and make a lot of progress with it, I want to actually have some context and not have to like set it aside so I can go look up stuff as I'm reading it. So once again, not at the top of my list, but I know at some point in the next couple of years, I'm going to really dive into this. And I guess the one thing I'll say before I set this to the side is that apparently it was secularized in its day and is treated as very secular today. And a lot of people only think about Hegel as like the precursor to Marx. But the more I read about it, the more I'm like, oh no, this guy was like a very spiritual guy. And he was really talking about this fine-tuned system of the way that spirit and culture and language moves through history in a way that creates these developments. And you guys are probably familiar with thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So I guess that is a big deal in this book. I don't know if that's where he introduces the concept. Like I said, I'm kind of new to it. I'll keep moving. Lastly, at least for this part, we have Friedrich Schiller's The Robbers and Wallenstein. I don't know a ton about this other than that Schiller was a good friend of Goethe. And so I will realistically get to this after I've exhausted a lot of Goethe. And unfortunately, I don't know if I picked the best translation because I'm going through some of it and it seems like it's a very literal translation. I'm not an expert on translations, but just in looking at it, it doesn't seem very poetic. It seems a little bland. So I could be wrong about that, but I might have to check into some other translations just to compare. But I'm still looking forward to reading it. It's supposed to be like a pretty big deal for its time. Let's keep on moving. Very briefly, this is one that you guys will probably be familiar with. The Master and Margarita. This is, I guess, a contemporary Faustian legend set in Russia or the Soviet Union. I'm not sure what their borders were at the time, but really looking forward to it. I've heard it's kind of hard to follow, and then there's a lot of mixed reviews of it that I've seen on Reddit too, that people were saying that they finished it and ended up really liking it and ended up thinking it was like one of the best books they'd ever read, but then also there was a lot of like plodding through stuff that didn't really appeal to them. So not the most glowing review, but I'm going to digest a little bit more Goethe and Faust before I get to The Master and Margarita. Let's keep it moving. Okay, so in reading Italian Journey and just reading more about Goethe and his background, I've come across, number one, Paradise Lost. He doesn't talk a lot about this book, but I was just looking for other books that could kind of put me in the same headspace as Faust. And I'm kind of surprised I was even interested in buying this because, you know, even 2 years ago, I'd have been like, John Milton? I'm not going to read John Milton. I want to read cool, hip, new stuff. But then, again, Faust kind of flipped a switch in my head. So I'm excited to check it out. at some point. But oh, it's so hard because I just bought so many books. I'm so excited to get into all of them, and I do want to be a little more organized in how I read it, so it feels like I'm digging into a topic and a set of ideas rather than just these one-off authors. But I'm very moody as well, and so it's just going to depend on how I'm feeling at the time, the next time I finish a book. Let's keep it moving. Okay, in that same vein, with Italian Journey, he's talking about Aeschylus and Sophocles a little bit and how they influenced him. And I have a half a mind to just start from the earliest literature that I can in the Western canon and just move my way through over the next like 30 years of my life. And so I might start with these because I guess these are hugely influential. If you don't know, Sophocles wrote like Oedipus and Antigone, and then this one is, I believe, a collection of different plays called the Oresteia. Might be mispronouncing that, but definitely looking forward to checking out both of these, seeing where a lot of these fun ideas and references come from in Italian Journey. So, on that note too, Faust is very spiritual and very occult, and that led me to purchase this just a couple days ago, actually, The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This is a huge, dense book, but I think kind of like the German Genius, it's like a intellectual history of occultism and Gnosticism and spirituality and symbolism and tarot, and like it's all over the place. It seems like it's a huge achievement for him to have completed this, so I'm excited to read it. I'll probably treat it more like an encyclopedia rather than something I'm going to read just start to finish, but it's one of those books I can just see I'm going to be referencing it for the rest of my life. As I was reading Goethe the Alchemist, I randomly opened to a page all about alchemy. There was this like weird synchronicity feeling with that. There's some cool prints and stuff on the inside of like, I guess this is Hermes, and Hermes Trismegistus is a big important symbolic figure in occultism. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I also went to his like headquarters called the Philosophical Research Society when I was living in Los Angeles. And it's a really cool complex that has a lot of like speaking series. And I saw this panel of people talking about just the role of literature in the contemporary world. And there was a famous comedian there too. Cameron Esposito was there the same night that I was there, which was kind of cool. But it's in this like old, very, very fancy, you got to wonder like where the money came from building in Los Angeles, because it's got to cost just like, I'm not a realtor, but it looks like there was almost like illicit means for securing this real estate. I'll leave it at that. Okay, so then lastly, within this little section of the video, I got into, or I shouldn't say got into because I haven't read it yet, Rilke and the Duino Elegy. So I was talking to Henry Gelinas, that you guys should follow on Instagram if you don't already, and we were talking just about like spiritually inspired texts and poems and the idea of the muse. And apparently Rilke was very prolific in his early 20s and late teens, and then didn't write a lot until he was struck by a vision like on the top of a mountain. And this came to him almost like verbatim. I might be getting some of that wrong, but the first line of it is very evocative. Who, if I cried out, would hear me among the angels' hierarchies? Pretty amazing. So really looking forward to getting into this, and I imagine I'll take my time with it too. I've also heard that a lot of Gravity's Rainbow in particular was mining some of Rilke's ideas and poetic devices and imagery and that sort of thing. And so much of this is making me want to get back into Gravity's Rainbow, but just in order to like diversify my own reading, I'm really, really resisting that desire. But I think once I consume like all of Goethe and all these different German writers, I want to go back and read Gravity's Rainbow, and with that occult background too. And I know I'm going to have an even wilder experience with it than the 2 times I've read it so far. But it's kind of frustrating. I'll use this as a little intermission, because every one of these books sends me to my Amazon cart, because each book is just connected to so many other thinkers and books and texts and poems that it's like a fractal. So I'm actually kind of having a hard time finishing books this year, because I'm getting so excited by all the references that they make, and I'm seeing this big web emerge of these different ideas that I want to check out. So it's a cool frustration to descend into. So I guess I actually do have 2 more German writers. Friedrich the Great, this New York Review, New York Review Books. I don't know why I forgot that, but this guy seemed really wild based on what I read in The German Genius, so I'm excited to dig into this. And this is a more controversial writer, Ernst Junger, On the Marble Cliffs, which I guess is about two priests who are botanists that are mining a lot of like alchemical ideas, and it also has to do with World War II. I guess Ernst Junger is controversial because he was like very anti-democracy, but he was also anti-Nazi. So like, I don't know. I'm not the best at navigating those moral terrains, but it came up. I haven't seen anything too damning about him other than that, like, he was a product of his time and a little bit more of a controversial figure. This one's also super short, so this will probably be pretty close to the top of my list. It's 113 pages, and at this point in my busy life living in New York, that length really appeals to me. So let's switch gears for a second, because I will talk about some African texts, and I guess these are all from Ngugi Wa Thiongo. I read Devil on the Cross early this year. Really, really liked it. It reminded me of Pynchon, but the style is completely different. But a lot of the satire is very big and playful in a way that Pynchon can get. And so I bought two more books of his. One is called Matigari, which I guess is kind of like an analog for Christianity. And just like Devil on the Cross, he was inverting a lot of Christian symbols as a symbol of like how colonialism was erasing Kenyan culture. And this is, I think, more explicit even than Devil on the Cross, because the main character is supposed to be, even in the world of the story, like a Jesus figure or a messianic figure. So very excited to get into this. I'm a little more intimidated by The Wizard of the Crow, which is his big old honker. It's like just over 700 pages, or I guess close to 800 pages actually, 768. And I've heard that in order to fully appreciate it, you need to understand all the oral tradition that went into the different references and images he puts in here, and that you can't even really appreciate it without even seeing it performed. So like, I just don't know how I would ever organize an experience like that for myself, but it does seem really cool, and I am excited to check it out when I have more headspace to dive into a 700-page book. But again, like, living in New York, my ability to be distracted is so high. People always said that before I moved here, that the fear of missing out is enormous in this city, and I can confirm. So I'll throw those back on the shelf. Let's see, what do we have next? I've also got some more from Clarice Lispector. The very first book that I started reading this year was Why This World by Benjamin Moser, who I think is responsible for a lot more of her recent translations. And I really liked it. I got about 200 pages into it when I realized I'm going to appreciate this book more when I've read more Clarice Lispector, because I've only read Agua Viva and Near to the Wild Heart, but I also picked up The Chandelier, which apparently isn't very good. At least it did not perform well according to the biography. I flipped through the first couple pages and I thought it was cool. Kind of reminded me of Virginia Woolf. And there's a lot of like spiritual, kind of metaphysical imagery right off the bat, of like rushing water as a metaphor for time never standing still. It's just this perpetual burning of entropy. Seems super cool. Of course, I got The Passion According to G.H. I think that I should just dive right into this one, because a lot of people consider this her masterpiece. And it has me almost completing like the full set where her face appears. So definitely looking forward to getting into this one too. And lastly, for Clarice, I've got The Besieged City. I know the least about this one, but it does seem pretty cool. I think this is one of her earlier novels, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me though. And it's a little shorter, so this will probably be higher on my list than The Chandelier. But she's cool. Just in reading that section of Why This World that I did, she had a very, very difficult life and upbringing, and her mom was sick, and then she died at a very early age in Clarice's life. And so a lot of the stuff in Near to the Wild Heart makes more sense now that she was using it as this kind of autobiographical opportunity to investigate some of that stuff. And it has definitely influenced The Kingdom of Liminal Space, but I don't want to say exactly how at this time. So I have 2 categories left in this humongo book haul. So allow me to get organized here. This next section that I'll do is kind of short. This is more miscellaneous, but they're both books by George Wylesol. I made a video both on TikTok and on Instagram talking about how this is like House of Leaves meets liminal spaces. And so that struck me because I'm working on a book that features liminal spaces, but it's like a choose your own adventure book that you don't approach linearly. And there are all these little puzzles that you have to put together in order to figure out what page to turn to next. And some of these kind of tripped me up. I'd imagine if you're a big video gamer, it'd be a lot easier for you. I am not. But like for here, for example, you have to enter the code, and there are little documents and little clues all around this big backrooms type space that have these series of numbers, and those end up being the page numbers that you have to turn to. But it's just so cool. And like, I'm not that into graphic novels or manga or anything like that. I have a couple volumes that I've picked up in the past year or so, but having it be in this like suburban office setting really appealed to me. And that's what I'm trying to get across in Kingdom of Liminal Space. So I don't know if it's given me ideas per se for Kingdom of Liminal Space, but I just love seeing that there's more stuff in this liminal space, backrooms aesthetic. You know, you get this like 80s office kind of vibe. And there are people in it too. I don't want to give too much of it away. So it's not just like only spaces. There's a lot of fun little Easter eggs and unexpected things that you can find. There's multiple endings. So I will definitely be going through this book again. My only issue with it was that it was so fun. I finished it in like 2 days. And so I'm going to set it to the side and then return to it with fresh eyes before too long. I kind of want to bring it on a family vacation and just see what my family thinks of it too. Another George Wylesol book, a little shorter, is called Curses. And there are all these kind of like weird little ideas and vignettes and different ways of getting cursed that he depicts in all these fun ways. And I haven't gotten too into this one yet, but I can only imagine that just like this, there's going to be a lot of surprises, and I'm sure it ties together in ways that I don't expect. Let me see if I can find a fun, it's kind of like a fun section to show you guys. Hope that doesn't get censored. That was not the intention. You get the idea. So here, like, here's a list of like cursed entities. This is an improvised horse. Like, wouldn't that be cursed if you woke up like that? So just really unique, and I love the very simple and loud color designs, and all the yellow is really appealing. So I'm super excited to check out more of his work. And if I understand correctly, he has more books than this too. I just decided to buy them, and I bought them on the same day as that Manly P. Hall, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, or I almost said sacred, The Secret. Okay, so that was a kind of brief miscellaneous section, and I will end with a bunch of these that have been recommended to me through social media. So some of these are actually from authors that I am mutuals with on Instagram and TikTok, but then some are just some that I've kind of found through those resources. So Stanislaw Lem, The Futurological Congress. I actually got this from a YouTuber. He didn't send it to me. Like, he doesn't know I exist. I don't think he follows me or anything, but he recommended it. And I think his page is called Liminal Spaces, actually. He's got some kind of liminal something in the name. I'll try to tag it in the comments because I forgot, because he has really cool videos, but it's super slim. And if I'm not mistaken, Stanislaw Lem wrote the sci-fi book that inspired Stalker, which is just one of those crazy Criterion slow burns, but like you can't look away. I was kind of struck in watching Stalker a few years ago that not a lot happens. It's just guys kind of like walking through this desolate landscape, but it's just amazing and so captivating, and it like reminded me of dreams that I'd had before. It's very, very trippy and very cool. So I'm super excited to check him out. This is a book that one of my mutuals sent to me called The Confusions and Confessions of an Oklahoma Psychonaut. And so I guess the author's name is Aeon here, but it's Clayton Stafford. And I'll make sure to link his handle in the description as well. It seems super cool, kind of just like a kind of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas kind of vibe. And I definitely plan to read it this summer. Seems like a fun time. And Clayton's a great dude, so make sure to follow him as well and order his book. I love the cover too. This like grid kind of fading into the psychedelia definitely seems like on point for the book. I also noticed it's got the same font as my first book, so every time I flip through this, it does feel like I'm going through Abraham again, which I don't necessarily recommend. Anyway, I got these two books from a TikTok friend named Alexandros. That's his handle anyway. And the first one, I see a lot of people talking about this author recently, Vladimir Sorokin. I might be saying that wrong, and Telluria. And this is, I think, kind of like Antoine Volodine, who's a big author that I really like, who has this kind of post-apocalyptic, mystical, communism versus capitalism smash in his world building. And this seems very similar, that just to read from the back, it says the 50 chapters of Telluria map out this brave new world from 50 different angles. And so it's going to like, neo-feudal world of fads and feuds, that there's some of it is the disorganization of the Middle Ages. You can tell it's not fresh in my mind. I bought this a couple months ago, but it does seem right up my alley. And Alexandros told me in particular that it reminds him of Pynchon. And so, say no more, right? Now, he actually came and visited, and we were able to meet up for a beer, and he got me this gift, The Lover by Margaret Duras, who I always forget the name of this movement. I think it's called the Nouveau Roman movement in France. And I had read Alain Robbe-Grillet, In the Labyrinth, which I had mixed feelings about, and we talked about it a little bit. He didn't like In the Labyrinth because it is very conceptual. It's all like, what if we didn't describe the characters? What if we only described the rooms that the characters were in? And it might have been a little bit more enjoyable if it had been a short story rather than a novel, but I was really struck by it because in writing The Kingdom of Liminal Space, I want to integrate some imagery and some metaphor and conceptual play related to spaces and what those can tell us about people and what kind of rooms you need to enter to be the best version of yourself. The first paragraph of this, too, is just a punch in the gut. It says, "One day, I was already old. In the entrance of a public place, a man came up to me. He introduced himself and said, 'I've known you for years. Everyone says you were beautiful when you were young, but I want to tell you I think you're more beautiful now than then. Rather than your face as a young woman, I prefer your face as it is now, ravaged.'" Hot damn! So I can tell I'm going to really dig this book. Also, it's like 116 pages? Come on! 117. Yeah, this is what I'm going for. And even in writing Lionel, I think a lot of people responded to it saying that they wish it had been longer. And so it's kind of interesting because I've connected with a lot of people here on Bookstagram and on YouTube and TikTok that are into these doorstop books. And I read so many of those in college when I had time to read an 1,000-page novel. But just in working and in teaching and in getting this book out the door and writing an album, I'm just I just can't focus on a book that's more than 300 or 400 pages long at this point. And so I do miss reading books that big, but I'm also you know what? I'm in my prime of my life. I'm in my 30s. I'm healthy. I'm having fun. And anytime I'm sitting down and reading a book, I'm kind of but I'm in this amazing city. So at some point I'm going to start reading those big door stoppers again. But for the short term, not really a big priority for me. And I hope that doesn't drive people away from reading my books because I like a short book. I think there's something kind of nice about having a concise statement and then just letting it be what it is. Okay, a couple more books in this category and then I'll close out because this is already way longer than I expected. Jason Pargin. He is a New York Times bestselling author and I'm mutuals with him on TikTok. It's super cool. We've connected and his videos and content are just so exciting and fun. He's, I think, the former editor of Cracked. So he's just been in the game for a really long time, and it really shows. And he sent me a advanced copy of his next book called I'm Starting to Worry About This Black Box of Doom. I hope I didn't miss any words in there. So I've got a PDF of that I'm going to dig into over the summer. But I also have Futuristic Violence and Fancy Suits. I can tell I'm going to dig it. He's a really cool guy, and his content and his mind are really inspiring. And so, yeah, definitely check out Jason Pargin and follow his stuff on social media, too, because he really embodies and exemplifies the idea of the content should be an end in itself. Even if it's an advertisement for your book, you should watch the video and that's it, and then ironically, that's actually what makes you want to click on the link. So if you're advertising his stuff, I think you should watch his method as well. So I've also got The Garden, a novel by Aidan Scott. This is another Instagram mutual of mine that we haven't had a ton of interactions, but we've messaged back and forth a couple times. He seems like he's into the same stuff that I am. And I bought this actually without knowing that there's some alchemy in there too. And that's what we ended up messaging about, that I had posted Goethe the Alchemist, and that caught his eye. And so I was like, ooh, well, if your book has anything alchemical in it, that's been a big topic on my mind recently. Love the cover. I love just like the simple white design too. Really sharp looking book. And I've seen a lot of people buying this. So get in on the conversation. Make sure that you check out The Garden by Aidan Scott. Now, 2 more to go, and then we'll close this thing out. You guys know this one. Same Bed, Different Dreams. I saw this everywhere on Instagram in the past couple months, and I think Ed Park just got an award for this somewhere in Los Angeles, so it seems like he's heating up. It's also just encouraging because it's supposed to be like a contemporary postmodern novel, and I love to see that those are still getting published and getting recognition, because sometimes it can be kind of lonely getting into these big ideas and these big literary movements that like nobody really cares about, or that you feel like it's from a bygone era. But it seems really awesome, and just the title, Same Bed, Different Dreams, tells me that there's going to be some weird like spiritual elements or different consciousness expanding opportunities here. So super excited to read this. And you guys, that is my timer because my laundry is done, but we'll just end it with Vineland. I have to read this. It's one of the few Pynchons that I have not read, but just with Paul Thomas Anderson's new film coming out before too long, I've got to read Vineland before I check it out, and God knows I'm going to make a video essay on that film. It looks crazy, the film, by the way. The minimal information that's come out about it says that it's going to be like Vineland, but with like sci-fi elements, and he's blurring all this kind of stuff. It's also supposed to be like his most mainstream film to date, so I don't even know what that's going to be. I know I'm going to love it, even if it takes me a couple viewings in order to digest it. You guys, that's all I have time for today. Check out Lionel Lancet and The Right Vibe if you want to support the channel, or if you just want a fun, funny read. Look out for Kingdom of Liminal Space. Check out my EP. Check out my Faust video. Check out my Licorice Pizza video. Scroll through my page. Love you to death. Goodbye.